Hey guys, wanted to go over what could be the biggest news story of the next decade. Didn't necessarily come out today, but I think this is vitally important that we understand what's going on here into maybe even 20 into the 2030s. Let me try to get my head out of the way. There we go. A little smaller head. I don't know why whenever I do these things, my face looks like I got a massive sunburn. I don't know why. Anyway, okay, this is what I think could be the news story of the 2020s and the 2030s. This is a map of China's Belt and Road Initiative, or when it first came out, it was the One Belt, One Road Initiative. This is basically a huge, massive infrastructure project that would connect China with all of these, they call them economic corridors, but extending over down to Singapore. I think that's a big one, especially what we've heard lately from Kyle Bass and my good buddy Eric Townsend on his podcast about Singapore replacing Hong Kong as the financial hub for this entire area. And in my mind, Singapore could replace pretty much everywhere as the financial hub. I'm talking about London, New York. I think Singapore could be the financial hub of the future. So and it extends down to Africa. Dar es Salaam, that's interesting. I don't know if you guys have been following me on social media, but I've been talking about Tanzania quite a bit lately for a variety of reasons. So when that popped out on the map, I thought that kind of sparked my interest. Another thing that I'd like to point out to the other side of the map is if you guys listen to my interview with Jim Rogers, his two favorite cities in the world right now, and I'm not making this up. I didn't tell him to say this. You can go back to the interview on the Rebel Capitalist show on my other YouTube channel. But one was Medellin, Colombia, and the other was this Vladivostok in Russia. It's this port town right here. And he is incredibly bullish on those two cities. And he really likes this port town, its proximity to China. It's kind of the gateway here to China and Russia. And based on this Belt and Road Initiative, you can see the Chinese mostly agree, or definitely agree. And it's not showing it on the map, but there is what they call a land bridge going from Vladivostok, which is basically like railway, all the way into Europe. That already exists. So now what China wants to do is build railways. Actually, these are railways that are already built. And you can look at the guide down here. And in the gray, those are railways that are either under construction or planning to be built. And so these are existing railways. And then the blue are the ports, and the black are current oil pipelines. And then, not sure, looks like that might be a railway or an oil pipeline that's planned for construction. But the bottom line is this proposal, which according to their goals, should be completed in 2047, is connecting this entire region. So all the way from Madrid, Spain, up to Moscow, through Poland, which Chris McIntosh is very bullish on, down to Turkey. These red marks are these economic corridors that they're planning on creating. So what is an economic corridor? You might be asking yourself. Well, first of all, let's hop over to this page. I wanted to point out that this project is the estimated cost for the project is 4 to 8 trillion. And it's not like China is just going out there and fronting the bill. Most of this is dollar denominated loans so far, which they're getting, or where are they getting the dollars? They're getting that from the United States. We're paying for this. How? Because with our trade deficit. So what's happening is Americans are kicking back on their couch. We're consuming more than we produce, and we're allowing China to produce all the things that we want to consume. So we're letting them work hard. We're giving them our green pieces of paper. And then China is taking those green pieces of paper that we are giving them because I don't want to use the word lazy, but the bottom line is because we're not willing to produce what we consume. So they're taking those green pieces of paper and building this. So when you talk about issuance of debt, good debt and bad debt, this is an example of good debt. Buying or taking, using your credit card to go to Hawaii would be an example of bad debt. Okay, so here we go. So these economic corridors, very interesting. The first one is a land bridge, new Eurasian land bridge, distinct from the Siberian land bridge. That's what we talked about earlier with Vladivostok, which goes from Russian eastern port of Vladivostok through Siberia to Moscow onward to the Western countries. This second bridge goes from China coastal cities of Linyungang and Rizhao to Holland's Rotterdam and Belgium's Antwerp. The 10,800 kilometer long rail links runs through Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, another interesting place I've been talking about, along with Tanzania, Poland, and Germany, and serves more than 30 countries and regions. Next one, I'm not going to go over all of them, but kind of the things that I highlighted, the China-Mongolian-Russian economic corridor that they're planning. This is a transport infrastructure and interconnectivity and port construction. So what I gather here is really kind of a highway system and more railway. And you say, oh, well, we as Americans don't really think twice about a highway system because we've had one here so long. But trust me, I've spent a lot of time in countries like Colombia where they do not have an I-10, as an example, that goes from California all the way to Florida. And trust me, you don't understand how big of an advantage that is to be able to transport goods from major city to major city just quickly and efficiently directly on a highway with semi trucks is such a massive advantage. Quick example, in Colombia, there are two major cities there, Bogota and Medellin. As the crow flies, they're not that far away. If they had an I-10 or an I-5, something like that, an interstate highway connecting them, you could probably get there in a couple hours, 2-3 hours, something like that. Instead, you have to go up this winding mountain pass and all these crazy roads, and it takes 10 hours or 12 hours just to get there. So think about how inefficient it is getting goods from one place to the other by adding each trip one way, you're adding an additional, let's say, 10 hours. And over the course of an entire year, and populations, Medellin of, call it 5 or 4 million, and Bogota, let's just call it 10 million. I mean, that is, when you look at it in terms of GDP, how much that would increase GDP just by that efficiency. I mean, it's just huge. And so that's why whenever I hear about highways being built in developing countries, it always kind of perks my interest. I listen. I'm like, what's going on there? Because I know from experience how important those highways are. And I think that's what they're doing here with this China, Mongolia, Russia economic corridor. And just going down the list here, a lot of the same. These are, I think, more ports for shipping back and forth. And then going down to the China, Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor, the China, Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor extends from China's Pearl River Delta westward along the Nanchang Gyeongsang Expressway and the Nanning. You can tell my Chinese really great. My Chinese. I haven't exactly been practicing my Chinese, obviously. High-speed railway via Nanning and Pingzhang to Hanoi and Singapore. I want to point that out because, again, they're really focusing on Singapore, and I think it's because they see that being a huge financial hub in the future. This land bridge, which when they've used land bridge before, it's usually railway, links China with China Peninsula and crosses the heart of Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, which I think is interesting. Remember, Jim Rogers has been talking about Myanmar for probably 8 years. And ever since I first heard him talk about it, you've seen it grow and grow and grow. And now it's being included in this Belt and Road project. Okay, and that's what I want to point out on this page. So what I really would encourage you to think about is not only this infrastructure project and excuse me, and the fact that our trade deficits, or basically the American consumer, is financing this because they're not willing to produce what they consume, or they're not willing to reduce their consumption to what they actually produce. So that's one thing I want to point out. I want to point out what good debt and bad debt looks like. I also want to point out this network, because when I see all of these economic corridors, these oil pipelines, energy, rail, highway systems, shipping ports, all of these, all this connectivity between producers and consumers and businesses and corporations and populations and countries, I see a network. And when you think about the dollar as the global reserve currency, the fact that it's a green piece of paper doesn't make the dollar stick. It doesn't give it its strength when it comes to being a global monetary system. What gives it its strength is the same thing that what gives Facebook its strength. And that's the fact that it's this network. It has a network that's very difficult to break because it's so entrenched in our daily lives. You could argue that for Facebook, for better or worse. And you definitely could argue that for the current global monetary system, or the dollar monetary system, let's say, dollar being the world reserve currency. So when I think about the future of the global reserve currency, I don't look at it as red pieces of paper versus green pieces of paper, or China versus the United States, or any of these things. I really think about it as competing networks. So currently we know what the dollar network looks like. And I think another competing network would be Bitcoin. When you combine the everything that's involved with the Bitcoin system, with the distributed ledger technology, with blockchain, etc. But I see these three networks competing. So meaning Bitcoin, the current dollar network, and obviously we could include the Fed creating a Fed coin, or central bank digital currency. But I also see this Belt and Road Initiative being the third competing network over the next 10 to 20 years. And I think that what we're looking at is going to give the digital yuan a lot of network strength, because I realize that building this is most of these loans are denominated in dollars. But let's be honest, when they roll those loans over, why couldn't they roll them over to yuan denominated loans? Especially if now we've got the PBOC with an infinite balance sheet that is willing to extend credit to all of these producers in Tanzania, in Spain, Poland, Turkey, Iran. I mean, everywhere. Nothing's certain, but you got to think through the probabilities. And if they roll that debt over into debt that's denominated in digital yuan, and then all the individuals and corporations in this area that we're looking at right here, they start transacting in digital yuan because it's so easy. They can just download the app on their phone and just bam, you're ready to rock. And let's remember that China has come out with the digital yuan. This is not tinfoil hat stuff. This is something they have already put into place, and they are testing right now as we speak. So that's the last thing that I wanted to bring up to encourage you to think about is moving forward into the next decade and the next 2 decades. Is this going to be potentially the new network that will issue in the new global reserve currency, being the digital yuan? And I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying I think I'm at least trying to go over the probabilities in my own mind, considering that this is going to most likely compete with the dollar and with Bitcoin. Who's going to win at the end of the day? I have no idea, but it'll be fun to watch.